Can you believe it's actually snowing? It's the 11th of April. Look at that. So I've just got a 2-mile walk in what I thought was going to be a drizzle, and look, it's snow, but I just got a 2-mile walk along the road here to get to my intended destination today. An ancient medieval village under threat. It's exciting. This is an incredible place that I'm going to today. I'm taking you with me, obviously, and I can't believe I've never been here before. I've heard about it. I've picked up one of its most potent myths many years ago, but I've never been here, not to my knowledge, unless I get here and find out that I have been here before. But this is going to be incredible today. And of course, this is the furthest afield that I've been for a long time. I'm right on the other side of London, right on the western fringe of London, the western edge, approaching Heathrow Airport. So I think we're going to have to allow ourselves to change the route here, because you can just see there behind West Drayton Library there's a really old looking church tower that I can't just bypass, even though the plan was just to go down Harmondsworth Road there to take the direct route to Harmondsworth, the aim of today's walk, the place of survey. But I can't ignore that church tower, so we're going to go and have a look at that, and that will then change our route very slightly. King's Paget Hotel, and the Pagets were one of the many landowners of this area. Talk a little bit more about that when we get to Harmondsworth, because there were various owners of this land throughout its history, but it gives an indication of its status as an ancient place. So here's a bit of a map. We're here by Drayton Hall. We're going to take a little detour to St Martin's Parish Church, and then ultimately we're going down here to Harmondsworth. It's only a distance of about 2 miles. St Mary's Church here is a real point. The Saxon Lake is another. And one of the reasons I'm coming out here today is that all this area here is under threat from the third runway at Heathrow. This could all be tarmacked over, which of course would be tragic. It's quite an interesting old grand building. Drayton Hall. You can see one part of it is a period building. I'm not entirely sure which period, and then they've added on some kind of new offices on the side of it. As a kid growing up out in Buckinghamshire, actually not that far from here, because we're on the border with Buckinghamshire, just down there, the Colne Valley. On the other side of the Colne Valley, you're in, you find yourself in Buckinghamshire at Ivor. And for me, West Drayton, that was London. We used to play cricket, our village cricket club, Woburn Narcovians Cricket Club, used to play against West Drayton. So for us, the trips to West Drayton were trips to the big bad city, West London, with the planes coming into Heathrow. It's quite interesting now, it's the most remote part of London for me, right on the edge of London. Here we go, here's St Martin's Parish Church. So the gatehouse here is the remains of the old West Drayton Manor House. This is why it's really important when you're walking to allow yourself to be drawn off the plotted route. St Martin's here wasn't in my notes, it wasn't in my research. I was fixated on Harmondsworth, and I would have bypassed this incredible church here. So this church dates from the 15th century. I think there is a feature inside which is older, from the 13th century, but the body of the church is largely 15th century with some Victorian restoration. So we'll just pass through this beautiful little park here. It seems to have a very interesting history. Just on the information board here, it tells us that from archaeological digs that this tract of land here formed part of a Roman trackway from St Albans to Staines, which is kind of incredible, isn't it? And it said until the 20th century, I guess then with the building of roads and other development, Up to that point it had been possible to walk along the trackway to Harmondsworth and on to Staines. Here's the Tudor map of the area. This is where we are here, that's the manor house, and we're going to pass through the grounds. It also tells us that the housing estate at the end was once the medieval town meadow, the Long Meadow, Great Benty and Little Benty. And this was all cultivated during the Second World War. It's part of the whole Dig for Victory effort, turned into allotments. Firstly, actually, I've got quite a long way into this video without acknowledging that this was a walk suggested to me actually only the other day by one of my supporters on Patreon. So thank you so much, Alexandre, it could be Alexander spelled R-E, or it could be Alexandra. But thank you, no matter how I pronounce your name. But thank you so much, because the minute I read your message, I was like, I have to go there. Even though actually Alexandra suggested that I wait until the great barn opens, the famous tithe barn that's out here. But I couldn't wait, I have to go here. And one of the reasons that I found this walk so urgent and essential to do, in a way, we can see from the information on the board we've just read back there, you see the remnants of the old manor house there. You see that tracts of land here that were once ancient meadows have been developed and built upon. And you realise how fragile our history is, how much of it could be swept away. And we look back into the past and we see that development, those acts of erasure that happened with the Victorian and the Edwardian expansion of London. And we tend to think that we're through that period now, that we preserve our great sort of historic sites in London. But the third runway development is a reminder that the history of London is still a very fragile thing, and the landscape we're going to see shortly could all be wiped away under a field of tarmac, completely gone and erased forever. Now we make our final approach towards the M4 motorway, and we're going to cross over into an ancient landscape under threat, the doomsday village of Harmondsworth. And it's funny, as we walk away from St Martin's parish church dating from the 15th century and head towards the significantly older church at Harmondsworth, it's interesting to think, I was reading in the Middlesex session rolls. I wasn't actually reading the actual session records themselves, I was reading reports from them in a history of Middlesex, like a 1920s or 1930s history of Middlesex. And it was really interesting to see the amount of attacks that there were against parish priests in the churches around here. West Drayton, I think St Martin's might have been one of them, and a few of the other local churches, where the priests were violently attacked in the churches. And in one case, I think it was in Ruislip, the priest was attacked violently and thrown to the ground during a service indeed. What was going on in 16th and 17th century Middlesex to inspire this real antipathy towards the clergy? So this is the site of the old medieval town mead, now buried beneath the housing estate. the M4 motorway. And in the distance there, wow, cars racing. And in the distance there we see our first tangible sign of Heathrow Airport, which is just on the other side of Harmondsworth. I may have already said it, but I'll say it again. It is so good to be out further afield on the far side of London after all those months confined to a very small circuit of my immediate surroundings. This is hopefully the beginnings of branching out a bit further, looking towards the summer when the restrictions are lifted in the summer and I can look further afield. Maybe I'll walk the whole of the new river one day. There's lots of other plans as well. Maybe I'll do a video just talking about my plans for this year. Let me know if that's the kind of thing you'd be interested in. We're in an airport landscape now. So my understanding of the situation with the building of the third runway at Heathrow is that there was a legal change towards the end of 2020, around October, November 2020, which has allowed the government to push ahead with plans to build a third runway here at Harmondsworth. So it's not a done deal yet. It just means now that the developers of the third runway can put forward plans for planning permission to build the third runway here, which is something that's been talked about for a while. And initially it was that plan was kind of squashed because of the environmental impact it would have. I mean, Heathrow is an incredibly busy airport. To have a third runway would just really very negatively damage the air quality in this area, which is already pretty poor. You know, you've got the M25, the M4, already Heathrow's two existing runways, and all the traffic that generates. What they really need here is another runway. So this road here will just take us down into Harmondsworth village, to the landscape under threat, a place in peril. Once you cross the M4, every lamppost here has a Stop Heathrow Expansion plaque on it. Lovely mural here. Here's a depiction of the tithe barn, which we will see shortly, hopefully. It's a fine looking building, which has got some real heritage to it. I would say that could easily be Georgian, couldn't it? Another really curious old looking building. Here is the hustle and bustle of Harmondsworth High Street. So, I read that the name Harmondsworth is of Anglo-Saxon origin, meaning Herrimund's or Herrimod's enclosure, the enclosure of Herrimod. We see that a lot when we go around London, don't we? Like, you had Hacker's Isle at Hackney, Stibber's enclosure at Stibbenhide, when we go into Stepney Green. Anyway, stories here around London. But they did find traces of Roman settlement here at Harmondsworth, suggesting that it's been a place of settlement at least in the Roman period. And I'm going to go out on a limb, as I like to do, and say, if you see the kind of location of it with the rivers and passageways, the ancient trackway passing down through the area down to Staines, it's possible that this was an area of settlement before even the Roman period. Pub Gardens open tomorrow? Probably the wrong day to come here, isn't it? Because I imagine they've got some good pub gardens around here which won't be too busy. And even though the runway itself might not necessarily cut through the very centre of the village, it would basically make this place untenable for habitation. So it would effectively be the end of Harmondsworth. huge old pile here, isn't it? This is the village green here. It's quite a poignant memorial to people who died in the First World War. And here we have the Five Bells pub, which is said to be over 400 years old. It's incredible to think that we could even contemplate destroying a perfect, beautiful little village like this in London, which is a real rarity. There are plenty of places in London which we say are village-like, but this is like a country village. This is a real rural nook. Barnes Wallis Memorial here, Barnes Wallis of the Dam Busters. I wonder what his association is. So here's the Church of St Mary. Interestingly, it dates from 1067, the year after the Norman Conquest. This is a really shady spot here. Before the Norman Conquest, the manor of Harmondsworth was owned by King Harold. It passed then, after 1066, to William of Normandy, William the Conqueror, who at that point granted it to an abbey at Rouen in Normandy, and it remained in their possession for quite some time. Then it passed through a number of hands. At one point it was owned by an Oxford College, which is a pattern again that you see around London. I'm hoping I can at least get to see the exterior of the Great Barn, because it's one of the principal attractions, if not the principal attraction of Harmondsworth, is this incredible 15th century barn, which is the largest extant timber framed building in Britain, which would be an amazing thing to see. And it's huge. I think it's like 80 foot long, but I have a feeling that it's closed because of COVID. But I've got a feeling you can't actually get into the grounds of the Great Barn. That'd be a shame, wouldn't it? I have a feeling it's through here. I think someone's just driven in there, so there's people in the grounds. I don't know if the gates are open. Yeah, the Great Barn would appear to be through here. So the gates are locked at the moment, but there it is. My word, it's huge.
Definitely worth a visit.
Is it? Ah, thank you. It's been described as the Cathedral of Middlesex. Well, that's a really good reason to return to Harmondsworth when it's open once again, to go inside the Great Barn. That's a video for the future. We'll just have a little bit of a wander around the village and then we'll head for Harmondsworth Moor. This is Summerhouse Lane. Harmondsworth Hall, one of the many historical buildings of this little village here. Go down here, down Moor Lane, which will take us to Harmondsworth Moor. There's some interesting features there to look out for. I suppose it's worth noting that Heathrow Airport was built on a hamlet that was attached to Harmondsworth, the hamlet of Heathrow, the Heath Row, part of Hounslow Heath as well, that was demolished and destroyed to build the airport. As part of that destruction, they also destroyed a very old enclosure with a processional way that led across the landscape that I think was Bronze Age. I'll correct that on the screen if I've got that wrong. But I think it was a Circus monument, like a very particular type of prehistoric monument, and that went underneath, I think, the second runway at Heathrow. So it feels like this area has been fighting a battle against the airport ever since it was built after the Second World War. So here is the Barnes Wallis Memorial, and obviously those of you who have seen the dam busters, and who hasn't seen the dam busters? If you haven't, you need to go and rectify that straight away. Sir Barnes Wallis, 1887 to 1979, designer of the R100 airship, the geodetic construction, upkeep, I don't know what that is, hobble, no, tall boy, and the Grand Slam bombs. Also the pioneer of the swing wing and tailless aircraft and hypersonic flight. So he, had quite a career. Here you go. The significance of this area is it was the Road Research Laboratory where they did the research into the bouncing bombs upkeep. This is complete madness, isn't it? This is actual snow now, like proper snow. Look at this. It's on my arms. 11th of April, let me remind you. This is so unusual. It did happen. I remember in 1998 I went to Australia just after we got married, actually, and got the coach to Heathrow, and it was in April. Yeah, it's like mid-April, and it was snowing, and I thought, good, going to Australia. I'll put the name of this little river here on the screen. Moor Lane allotment site. Be a nice place to have an allotment, wouldn't it? Moor Lane, leading to Saxon Way. Wow, I love this stuff. So somewhere down here there's like a viewpoint which is constructed from the original stones of Waterloo Bridge, and apparently it has some amazing views, so let's see if we can find it. River Colne here, which is a really beautiful little river. So Harmondsworth Moor here was built on a former landfill site and landscaped by British Airways, according to the information board. You can hear the sound of the M25, just the other side of the moor here. We are right on the edge of Greater London, right on its western perimeter. So for much of the Middle Ages, this was an isolated wooded area. I read a story, which I'll look up when I get home, about the last wolf that was found and I think was killed at Perry Oaks. It's one of the great sort of like legends of Middlesex. And Perry Oaks is, I believe, under Terminal 5 of Heathrow, just over there. In Highwayman's Heath by Gordon S. Maxwell, published in 1935, we find this reference to the last wolf of England. In All the Year Round for 1868, as this paragraph recounts Maxwell. Hounslow Heath was once an oak forest that spread its green boughs from Staines to Brentford, and there is an old tradition that the last wolf in England, killed centuries ago, was hunted down at Perry Oaks in that neighbourhood. This was a really densely, quite wild, remote area until not that long ago, if you think about the entire kind of time arc of the story of London and the surrounding villages. One of the other stories of that period of remote Middlesex, remote London, was a case of witchcraft recorded here in the Middlesex Session records, when Elizabeth Duck was accused of enchanting an ox in 1575.
I wonder how you do enchant an ox, and I wonder what an enchanted ox actually did. How did an enchanted ox behave? How did they know? Was she found guilty? So this is a memorial. This is on this site on the 16th of September 1943. An RCAF Halifax bomber crashed on return from a mission with the loss of all 7 crew members. This is a memorial to all those who served in 427 Squadron and in 6 Bomber Group, RCAF. Is that the Royal Canadian Air Force? It was unveiled in 1999 on the 7th of July. I just slipped down this bank here and my right leg went behind me and to the side really badly, and I'm in quite a lot of pain right now, but it's not broken, that's for sure. The ankle's not broken, the knee crunched a bit, but oh, that was really painful. I haven't tried to stand up yet, but the fact that I can talk like this to the camera is a good sign. In case it doesn't come out on my other camera, I just slipped down this bank behind me. I was just looking at my phone to see the location of this pile of stones we get a viewpoint. And I just slipped and my right leg just went out backwards and sideways behind me in a really bad way. And I was in a lot of pain. So I just laid on my back down here swearing for about 5 minutes, fearing the worst. But I think I'll be able to stand up. Oh, I'm going to put that down as a lucky escape, because that could have easily have been a broken ankle or a really badly damaged knee. I think I can feel my ankle pulsing, but in a sign that tells me that it's coming back to life again. It may mean this walk is slightly truncated. I really wish I had my walking stick with me, my walking pole. I carry it everywhere normally, and I haven't got it with me today. Wow. I'm just going to sit here for a little bit and recover before I try and put any weight on it. I feel like it's going to be okay. The fact that I can feel pain in it is a good sign, I think. And the knee isn't too bad. The knee's just, I think I'm going to be all right. And I'm walking. So this will be all right in a bit. Beautiful River Colne once more. It's really beautiful when you walk west out of London towards Buckinghamshire, as I've done on a number of occasions, and there's a few videos down here which I'll post links to. But at that point you cross a sequence of rivers. It starts with the Colne, and you've got the Wray River, and there's a few other ditches as well. It's further north is the best point to make that, near Harefield. And it's a really delightful area, and it's followed then by a sequence of lakes. This is one of my favourite little pockets of London, actually, where the Colne and the Wray River flow side by side. I can now walk at a fairly even, steady hobble, something which, with the problems I've had with particularly my left knee, but both of them over the years, is something that I'm actually quite familiar with. So I'm okay to carry on. It's such a beautiful evening, isn't this? Quite surprising given the weather earlier on. Now, where's this Keyhole? Aha, here we go. It won't come out there, but that's the signpost for the Keyhole over this bridge here, which I think is called Jones Bridge. Wray River gives its name to the nearby village of Raisby. Really delightful river, this. You've got rabbits scuttling around in the brambles here. Really beautiful scene. I can see it up there. That must be the Keyhole.
So these are the stones from the old Waterloo Bridge. So I think this is a piece of land art. Although I might regret it, I feel like I'm obliged to try and go to the top of this little mount here. Wish me luck. This is a good view. Down there we look across Heathrow Airport. To the left of it is the land it's going to gobble up. In fact, actually, I think it will gobble up where we stood right now as well. And then looking further south, you can see way out, way beyond London down there. Way beyond down into Surrey, the other side of Croydon. Getting up here was the easy bit. I think it's getting down that's going to be the problem. At least my camera's down there recording it if I fall. So I think that's a heron. Well, this is a really beautiful spot. It's about an hour and a bit before sunset. We've got the lovely light evenings now. But I'm glad I pushed myself up here. It's really gorgeous. I was going to extend the walk and do a loop of Terminal 5 at Heathrow and come around the other side and go to Hatton Cross, because there's an old site there, a prehistoric site on the south side of Heathrow Airport I wanted to include in this walk, but I'm afraid that's slightly out of the question now. I've got about a 40-minute walk, normal walking speed, to the tube at Terminal 5. That's the way I'm going to go now, take it nice and steady. So it'll still be an interesting walk for us. It's the idea of going to Heathrow at the moment. It seems strange, doesn't it? And it's noticeable at the moment there are far fewer planes in the air than normal. I know when I've walked in the vicinity of Heathrow before, the planes have just been every 2 minutes or so. And at the moment, unless I'm on the wrong side, of course, but... Great, this is what I need. A little road with no footpath. I don't think it's wise for me to take a long walk along a road with no footpath. So I'm going to find an alternative route, and I think if I go along Accommodation Lane, there's a nice little footpath. I'd like to do a little bit more of the river as well, so hopefully we can make that a reality. A long road walk at the end of an expedition can sometimes be a bit of a drag, to be honest with you. Sometimes it's unavoidable. I suppose particularly in the dark where there's no footpath or you're not able to find the footpaths. But it's so lovely just to be out here in the sunset. And I'm forced to take my time and to go slowly, so why not linger in a more sort of bucolic environment than just going down. I think that road's called Tarmac Way or something, which is not the most appealing name really, is it? So I think there's a little footpath up here that takes us around and about. Should be interesting. So I think I'm going to take this little path here, which leads along the side of the Duke of Northumberland's river. It takes me down to the A4, the old Bath Road. There's a beautiful lake here. I think this is something to do with British Airways. Something slightly Black Mirror-esque about that building there, though, isn't there? Duke of Northumberland's river, I believe, is a man-made river. I think we encountered its confluence with the Thames when doing the Capital Ring in March last year. The absence of air traffic has been a real feature of the lockdown, hasn't it, of the last year? Even when flights started operating again, they're still an awful lot less frequent. I mean, it's really noticeable here, and I'm right at the end of the runway
right near Terminal 5, and where I live I'm on the flight path for, well, actually Heathrow actually turn over East London and make their approach to here, but also on the City Airport flight path, and it's been really noticeable, the lack of air traffic. It's been really nice actually. I mean, I appreciate that people like to travel and it's been bad for that, and it's really sad to think of all the kind of people who have been furloughed or may lose their jobs in the aviation industry, but from an acoustic point of view it's been quite nice. The A4, one of the main roads heading west out of London. Well, it's bad news for a man with an injured leg. Bus is not serving this stop. We've got to keep on keeping on, man. It's a bit ominous. Colnbrook By-Pass Detention Centre. Can't work out if that's a kind of snazzy looking Premier Inn or whether that's actually just the outer layer stripped off whilst they do some building or renovation work on it. This walk just lumbers on, going down this little alleyway here towards Heathrow Terminal 5. Here's a water pump, the Longford pump. It was put here in 1827. It's 22 minutes till the next bus, so I am actually going to walk. I'm going to hobble on. I'm not waiting 22 minutes at a bus stop. It's interesting, there are a few really lovely old timber framed buildings here in this along the Bath Road, right on the edge of the airport, so I guess these must be the survivors of the old village. I suppose all of this will get swept away as well by the third runway. The White Horse looks like a nice pub for a summer's drink. There's a lovely old thatched cottage behind it. Really lovely old barn here as well, in Longford village, next to this pub, and here we have a plane coming overhead. The King's Arms. Won't be able to make it out, but there's a heron down there in that concrete channel. This is an unusual landscape. We've got the Duke of Northumberland's river here, and there is Heathrow Airport Terminal 5. This is one of the stranger roads to walk on in London. Wallis Road, must be named after Barnes Wallis. Gotta say, this has been a really great walk. I nearly just thought I'm going to get an Uber to West Drayton to get the train because of the leg. But I'm glad I've pushed on to find myself here. It's such a surreal kind of landscape in a way. Walking around the edge of Heathrow Terminal 5 when, well, I mean, I imagine the airport's not very busy. And the landscape around it is certainly very quiet, very few cars on this road compared to what you would expect. It's certainly a good way to start venturing out beyond Leytonstone and Leyton and Walthamstow. Imagine all the people driving along this road, approaching the terminal, excited about the adventure ahead. I'll never forget coming to Heathrow to head off on my round the world trip in November 1994. I'm just going to pause that thought while this plane takes off. It was the first time I'd ever been on a plane. I'd never flown before, and I was taking a flight from London to Bangkok, and I had a load of plane tickets booked for a 1 year round the world journey, and I was so excited. 23 years old. Oh, I couldn't wait to start, and I went through I went through the barrier and I didn't look back. My mum always reminded me of that. She waited for me to turn around and wave again, and I was like, yes, I'm finally off. And it was a completely life-changing experience. I didn't go around the world for 1 year. I got to Australia and met my wife, and ended up being away for 3 years in total, and we travelled back to England together. And if I hadn't made that trip, I wouldn't be talking to you now on this YouTube channel. I wouldn't be making these videos. It started my real kind of passion for travel and exploration. Obviously I had my passion for walking that I had developed as a child, but it really kind of took the whole thing to another level. It's a totally transformative experience. The question is, what will be a transformative experience if I can't find the way into Terminal 5? Well, I'm hoping the tube station's just straight up ahead. Interesting experience. It's been such a long time since I've flown from Heathrow, I can't actually remember where the tube station is, but I'm guessing I'm going to have to go inside the terminal building to find the tube station. So I will wrap up the video here, because I'm going to have to put my mask on, and I can't imagine they're too keen on you filming inside there. I'll try and show some footage of my journey through the terminal to the tube station, so you'll see that I find my way to the stations safely. Thank you so much for joining me on this slightly unusual walk. I would say this is one of the most unusual walks of the year so far. Obviously it's only middle of April. It's right up there with the walk I did with Paul Powsland for very different reasons though. And thank you as ever to my brilliant supporters on Patreon, the Radical Ramblers and the Fellow Travellers, but especially this week because this is a walk that directly came from Patreon, so thank you so much for that. And as I always like to say, I look forward to seeing you on the next walk, wherever that may be. Maybe I'm going to jump on a plane and take off somewhere exotic. Haven't got my passport.